Okay, so now we're live streaming, so I'll do what I did just a second ago. Thank you to my amazing partner, Bradley. This has been great. I've loved debating with you this weekend. It's been a lot of fun. And shout out to Anthony Berryhill. It's been a pleasure working with you, and you've taught us quite a lot. Yeah, so the speech drop is in there. I think everyone has access. And without further ado, I'll begin on first word. Thank you all for judging as well. I appreciate it. The first contention is humanitarian aid. Humanitarian aid stops authoritarian abuses. 5 reasons why. First, authoritarianism worsens all aspects of people's lives. Kasparov 17, quote, 3 billion people are currently controlled by authoritarians. That's 53% of the world. Authoritarianism is the largest challenge facing humanity. Authoritarians imprison dissidents, abuse protesters, tyrants dismantle free press, jail opponents, manipulate elections, and commit human rights violations. Second, aid gives democracies leverage over authoritarians. Matiz and Shoney 18, quote, we find statistical evidence to contend that foreign aid has a negative effect on autocratic survival as a proportion of aid coming from democratic donors increases. In autocracies receiving aid from democratic donors, larger amounts of aid are able to more rapidly transform autocracy's political conditions. The greater the leverage a democratic country has over autocracy, the more vulnerable the autocratic recipient is. In cases where the United States has a strong leverage, foreign aid increases the risk of autocratic failure by over 50%. 3, aid positively impacts democratization. Zarazuza 21, quote, overall findings point to a positive impact for aid on democracy. In particular, they suggest that democratic aid generally supports rather than hinders democratic building around the world, while its effectiveness is likely influenced by aid modalities and recipient country context. 4, increased chance of democratic transition. Bermeo 2011, quote, aid from these donors has a positive association with the probability of democratic transition. Each of these is consistent with donors prioritizing democratic transition, either by using aid to help bring them about or by rewarding countries on the verge of having a transition. Democratic donors have found ways to give money without further entrenching the regime. There's strong evidence that donor intent matters in determining outcomes. 5, even if we don't lead to full regime change, we reduce chances of violence. Trone 11, quote, democratizing states that receive higher levels of aid are less likely to experience conflict than those that receive less aid. Substantively, the conflict dampening effect of every dollar of aid per 1,000 of citizens is around 4%. Democratizing states which do not receive aid are over 4 times more likely to experience civil wars than non-aid recipients. Second argument, disengagement. Global populism is on the rise. Norris 17, quote, populists win culture wars. During the past 2 decades, a variety of populist parties have taken root in many countries, gaining seats and reaching offices. Populism is a philosophy of governance without safeguard for minority rights and checks and balances. Second, populism structurally guarantees more conflict and heightens escalation risk. Dresner 17, quote, populist leaders more closely resemble revolutionaries and established politicians. The ambition contributes to aggression. Populists are more likely to pursue high-risk revisionist foreign policies. Populist leaders care about recognition by others and will be quick to anger if that recognition is not forthcoming. Populist foreign policy leaders will face psychological and domestic political barriers to admitting error or reversing failing policy. They're less likely to correctly perceive how the world works, and an international crisis triggers rally around the flag effects within the domestic population, making it easier to suppress domestic dissent. That matters because attempting to disengage from authoritarian regimes forces them to do bad things to maintain their power. First, double down. Sanctions cause countries to double down on their human rights violations. DePietris 20, quote, sanctions rarely succeed in forcing targeted countries to moderate their behavior. Taking action against another country's economy can produce precisely the opposite. The purpose of sanctions is not merely to collapse economies or punish an adversary. The objective is to persuade a target to change its policy. If a country under sanctions views objectives as a direct threat to what it perceives as its own interests, the sanctions will not only fail, they could result in that country doubling down on previous behavior, making the issue at hand more complicated, more dangerous. Second, economic impacts make authoritarians more popular. Stewart et al. 20, quote, our model shows that calamitous economic shocks increase support for right-wing politicians, especially those of the far right who denigrate social outgroups. Economic stress and fear have shown to be highly localized predictors for the success of a number of populist movements. Then, sanctions have made Russia more repressive. Ingram 2022, Russia is nearly isolated online after international sanctions cut off many services from abroad, and the Russian government clamped down harder on online speech and access from within its borders. Then also, if democratic countries pull back, other authoritarians fill in. Authoritarian regimes help each other. Libman 2018, quote, regional organizations created by powerful authoritarian states redistribute resources, providing legitimacy to smaller, economically weaker autocracies. By doing so, they insulate these weaker members from domestic turmoil or discontent, as well as from the potentially threatening influence of international democratic actors. Basically, they fail entirely about what they're trying to do. They reify the human rights abuses, make them worse. We have a chance of solving it.
Okay. Just a quick content warning before I upload the doc. It does have a brief mention of graphic violence. If anybody is not okay with that, I can block that out now before I upload it into the doc. Can everyone give me a thumbs up if that's okay if I upload it now? Okay. And then Judge Paxton, sorry, I can't see you. Okay. Then I will upload that now. Okay, it's uploaded. And then let me set my timer and I'll begin. We affirm the resolution resolved. When in conflict, democracy should prioritize isolation over engagement when responding to human rights abuses by authoritarian regimes. We offer the framework of net benefits. Contention 1 is isolate Saudi Arabia. Biden is engaging Saudi Arabia now with political and military support in exchange for peace. The consequence is more Saudi power and Yemeni suffering. Within 21. What's really driving this arms sales is Biden's administration effort to offer Mohammed bin Salman a sweetener to help him swallow the pending Iran deal, as the Obama administration tried to do first by supporting Riyadh's war in Yemen. To get Saudi Arabia to sign the Abraham Records, bribing the crown prince with bombs, selling more arms to Saudi Arabia now rewards the country's worst behavior, encouraging the crown prince to reject reasonable negotiations and double down on an unwinnable war, while further entangling the United States in his abuses, destabilizing the region, and inviting terrorist attacks on Americans. Americans should not be fooled by the semantics of defensive weapons. The arms sales is a gesture of political support for their Saudi royal family. U.S. policies often confuse support for an unelected tyrant as support for a country. Supporting the crown prince, helping him further consolidate power and unreleased repression is against the interests of the Saudi people. It's very clear what the outcome of the nearly a decade of U.S. support for the Yemen war is, and what new arms sales to Saudi Arabia will exacerbate: mayhem, suffering, and disaster. And Western democracies are supporting Saudi Arabia in its war in Yemen. Wholesale isolation of the Saudi regime is the only way to end the war. Riddell 21. The war in Yemen is America's war. Saudi Arabia has spent a fortune buying arms from America to prosecute a war that has killed almost 250,000 people, the world's worst humanitarian catastrophe in our lifetime. Washington and London continue to export arms from Saudi Arabia from 2015 to 2019. Barack Obama could have stopped the war at its start in 2015 by cutting off the military, diplomatic, and intelligence support for Saudi-led coalition that imposed a blockade on Yemen and began deadly airstrikes on civilian targets. And this is causing millions to die of starvation and disease as the war rages on. Bin Mir 18. The United States and other Western powers are supplying the Saudis with weapons they need to massacre Yemenites. Silencing a journalist by slicing him to pieces is not only an assault on the freedom of press, but an assault on all of us as human beings. 22 million are in need of humanitarian aid, 5.2 million children are starving to death, and nearly 1 million are believed to be infected with cholera. Over 8 million people are facing famine, and 2 million are displaced and deprived of basic needs. Contention 2 is isolate Russia. Diplomacy with Russia failed. Newman 22. The invasion of Ukraine followed a series of failed diplomatic efforts. In December, Biden and other European leaders also met with Putin in an effort to diffuse tension. Biden spoke directly with Putin that nonetheless resulted in no fundamental change. Steep consequences that the White House promised failed to deter Putin from the invasion. And export controls prevent Russia from advancing its economic and military sector, the only way to force Russia to change its foreign policy. Cohen 22. U.S. sanctions cannot alone prevent Russia from continued military escalation. Assistance from major tech producers is crucial. Revived and organized export controls would bar sensitive tech inputs that Russia requires to diversify its economy and advance on its military sector. The U.S. must work with European and Asian allies to limit the vital supply of these key technologies and components to aggressive Russia in order to change its imperialist foreign policy and abuse of its neighbor. And Putin is creating a blueprint for genocide in Ukraine. Dickinson 22. In order to create the Russified Ukraine he dreams of, Russia will need to pacify or remove the vast majority of the population. Western leaders have reacted impressively to the shock of Putin's invasion, but they may not have yet grasped the true gravity of the situation. The risk of genocide in Ukraine is now very real. Putin has crossed almost every imaginable red line and turned his country overnight into an international pariah. He will pursue his criminal ambitions with an increasing recklessness that reflects his growing desperation. It is for those reasons that I would ask for an affirmative ballot in today's debate, and I am also open for cross-ex.
Yeah, before we begin, would you mind sending an updated doc that has the second contention in it?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did that not have the second contention?
No, it didn't, but it's all fine.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, give me 2 seconds, and I will update a doc.
It's all good.
Okay, sorry, it's gonna take just a second longer. It highlighted everything in the doc the next time I tried to save it.
No,
So
it's all good. No worries.
okay.
Sorry, is it possible, like, if your partner could work on sending it while we just go ahead with CrossX?
Are you good to send it? Yeah, my partner can go ahead and send it. I'm sorry about that.
No
And then,
worries.
all right, so then I'm open for cross-ex, and you're welcome to have the first question whenever you're ready.
Awesome. So, can you explain what the specific solvency through the Russia contention is? You talk about export controls. Is that correct? Is there anything?
So that's our Cohen 22 card, and
Okay.
basically what this is stating is that Russia relies on the U.S. as a tech export, specifically for like semiconductors and stuff that regards military equipment. So if we create exhaustive export control specifically on tech to Russia, with not only us but also everyone we export to, then Russia would not have the technology to fund its military expenditures anymore.
Wait. So basically, actually, you can have a question. Go for it. I'll ask that after.
Sure. So, in your first contention, you say that aid impacts democratization. Can you just give me a couple of examples of where what's aid and where that has actually happened, like empirical examples?
Yeah, of course. One second. So the the Matisse card is a meta study of 60 years of instability and over 457 coups that they've conducted lots of mathematical analyses on. So many countries. And the Zarazuza card, I can do more later, is also quite large. It's done like 17 countries in Europe and Central Asia, a handful in Latin America, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, Paraguay, Uruguay, and more. It's over at 91 studies. Yeah. Okay. Back to the export controls thing. So if can you please nail down exactly what you're talking about? Is there a specific type of sanction, a specific type of export? Or is it just like on the tech?
Yeah. So basically, okay. So specifically for Russia, what Cohen 22 is talking about is an exhaustive, exhaustive export control on tech. It's a tech.
So what sort of tech are we talking about? Are we talking about like surveillance, like cameras?
Sure. Like it's all tech. It's all tech to Russia. We cut off all the tech to Russia.
Okay. So
it's an exhaustive export control.
Okay. So just got it. Okay.
We're arguing for wholesale embargoes.
Understood. Do you have a question?
Yeah. So can you just explain your second contention of global populism?
Yeah, of course. So basically the first part of it is sort of like characterizing to you, and like if need be, we can like explain the connection. But basically, like tons of populist leaders are also authoritarian. There's a large amount of like populist authoritarian. So what the first part of it is characterizing to you how they make decisions, the psychological standpoint behind them. That's just context for the later arguments about how they're going to double down when you do your case. They're going to do more human rights abuses. If you induce economic shocks or disrupt their sectors, they're going to become more repressive, which is a cruel cycle for your side.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Oh, no, go ahead.
Sorry, I'd like to ask a question on isolating Saudi Arabia. So is Saudi Arabia just like a full embargo as well? And
yes.
Okay. And how are we engaging with Saudi Arabia right now?
Right now, we're giving them arms sales.
Okay. So your argument is not only don't give them arms sales, but just like entire embargo.
Yeah.
Okay. That's fine.
All right, no problem. I'm sending it now. If my computer would decide to actually work. All right, 1 second. Okay, it should be there.
I'll give you a second.
Let me know when you're all ready. Sorry, After y'all good? Okay, cool. Any judges not ready? Oh, sorry. After you saying you want a second. All right, cool. Before I start, yeah, thanks Eli. Been a great time. Actually, I have to open it back up because I had to close the document to send the doc. Sorry, 1 second. But yeah, good time. Shout out to Anthony. Been a great help throughout this time. Been a fun tournament. Yeah. As soon as my doc opens, I will start. Also, sorry for the camera. My camera won't work for some reason. So yeah, sorry, apologize for that. All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Framework should be util, probably because it's just best aggregates preferences. I don't know if net benefit's different, but just to prevent them from trying to go for a framework later. First, the link to Saudi argument. The Saudis have enough weapons to continue the war, even if U.S. cuts sales. 918. Riyadh could probably keep bombing at its current rate for several years, even if all U.S. deals were rejected, cutting off deals. It would not meaningfully slow the air campaign anytime soon, so they don't actually do anything. But second, also Madison 18 tells you that the war will happen anyway because the Yemeni government and Saudi Arabia will continue to fight this war with or without U.S. support. Those who can condemn the Saudi involvement and ignore Iran's hostile role in Yemen will only do more harm to Yemeni civilians and empower Iran and its Yemeni proxies. But then also, we think that this actually gets worse because it's a disadvantage. Karsanam 18 tells you that Saudi Arabia just gets weapons from Russia. It's like the talks for Saudi Arabia to acquire Russian S-400 systems are continuing, and Saudi signed a memo of intent. If they pull out, we think this is really bad because Brian 18 tells you that the S-400 is a real game changer due to the multiple intercept missiles. It can fire 4 different missiles to 400 kilometers, which is actually really bad because the U.S. does not have a true competitor to the S-400 system, so we think it's worse. All those are reasons why they don't actually end the civil war, but turn it because we think that you get better. We think U.S. aid prevents a war in Yemen by encouraging the Houthis to avoid peace talks. 18. Oh, sorry, no, sorry. Ooh. Don't read that card. Sorry, I'm not reading that. Rogan 18. Pulling U.S. support kills peace talks and more civilians. Rogan 18. If the U.S. pulls out support, Saudi inhibitions about Khartoum Hilmi formations, and Riyadh will lose interest efforts to reach a ceasefire. Developments will be disastrous for Yemeni civilians. The only reason Saudis are moving towards a ceasefire is administrative pressure. It is ludicrous to think that Prince would cease his effort absent U.S. pressure. Saudis care little about killing civilians if they care it might win the war. America is the only check that the Yemeni civil war has. It will be a lot less worse if the U.S. disengage. This is important because the only world in which you actually get negotiations is in our world where we can actually engage with them. Their world, it continues for longer. This turns all their evidence. But Iran DA, Hansen 18 tells you that in the Middle East, we must keep our eyes on the biggest threat in the region, the dangerous and really the anti-American government of Iran poses a huge pressure to its allies and to our ally Israel. This is important because they continue to say that turning our backs on the Saudi government will push the country to make further reforms, institute a greater respect for human rights. We must work to push the government towards further reforms. But this is important because it tells you that arms sales cement the Saudi relationship. 1918 tells that the U.S.-Saudi strategic relationship is built on the Saudi on a simple premise: Washington provides physical arms, but arms sales are integral to this relationship. The task of maintaining a large Saudi army military binds Washington and Riyadh. What this means is that an unrestrained Iran causes escalatory Middle East war. Wayne 18 since the Middle East hasn't seen a major split, and since the 80s, the path to escalation is clear and apocalyptic. Iran and Israel have been engaging in threats for decades. What's different is now the Syrian civil war, which has sucked in both countries, provides a battle space. The problem is that it's a tinderbox. Iranian actions destabilize the region. All right, cut the prolif DA onto Russia. We can do everything they say because this is a war, not just human rights violations. This is important. In a war, we can do anything they say. Also, prefer our evidence of 60 years. First, delink it because negotiations are working right now. Saldita 2020 tells you that Ukraine and Russia are making near an agreement on critical issues which would lead to a ceasefire soon. Retransmission of both sides are important subjects. We are hopeful for a ceasefire if they do not sit back from current positions. Second, again, engagement through diplomacy ends the conflict. We only save lives. Offer 19 says that direct dialogue between regional actors can launch negotiations that lead to stability. We solve in our world. Also Turnip though, because sanctions entrench authoritarian legitimacy. Leaders just use justification to make resources more scarce. Durst 2009 says that leaders use economic sanctions tool to manipulating access to resources, which means to instance their authority, and also turn it again because authoritarians become more oppressive to save their seat in power. Ingo 13, in the case of autocratic regimes, respects for human rights decreases further after the imposition of their sanctioned regime. So what we're saying is that in their world, Russia gets way more pushed into their side. They're more likely to continue on the negotiations solving ours. So proud, Vodek.
Just real quick, before I start prep, do you mind uploading a document of everything that you did read? So
Yeah,
I
sure, that's fine.
Okay, yeah,
One
thank you.
All right, it's done. All right, open for cross. Oh, yeah, that's right, not cross. My bad. Sorry. Been a long day.
Yeah, I don't see it yet.
Oh, it says it's sent. I just picked it up for my.
What's it named?
Should be finals. I think it may just replace the original finals neg rebuttal.
Oh,
Yeah, it's the
okay.
same thing. Can you
Yeah.
download it and see if it's different?
Yeah, let me check. Oh, yep, it's good. It's good.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Okay, just give me a second. I'm gonna go ahead and run prep, so I'll start that now. Okay, so I went ahead and stopped prep at 140. Give me 1 second to write that down.
Sorry, 140 used or 140 left?
Yeah, 140 used, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, give me 1 more second to upload the doc. We're F. Yeah.
There we are.
Okay. So it should be in there. Just a brief off the clock roadmap. We'll start on framework, then we'll move into the affirmative flow, starting with Saudi Arabia, then Russia, followed by the negative contentions. So I would also just flow framework on a separate sheet of paper, which is probably okay. I do also want to mention, oh, I should probably do this real quick. There is a content warning on 2 of the cards that I'm going to read, and it does, just real quick, they do briefly discuss instances of sexual violence. So I just need to know if somebody needs me to take that out. But so can I just get a thumbs up if everybody's okay? Okay, and then
We're good with it.
okay, Paxton. Okay, there, I see that. Okay, just give me 1 second to reopen the doc. Good. I'll be signposting all the cards, so they're not necessarily in order. There's analytics in between. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I don't know what my timer. First on framework, they concede our framework of net benefits means that you compare impact in our scenarios, or like essentially our scenarios of genocide outweigh their unquantified repression count and their possible democratic transition. Prefer case-specific evidence too. Generics that aggregate don't account for individual case studies. Let's move into, that's why you prefer ours over util specifically. Let's move into Saudi Arabia. First, Russia can't fill in multiple warrants and shortfalls. That's Eden 22. Russia's invasion of Ukraine will likely prove to be the final nail in the coffin of Moscow's goal of becoming a major supplier of military hardware to the Middle East. However, shortcomings in what Russia can actually offer, what regional countries want, and the difficulty of doing business with Moscow became evident even before the Ukraine war. Then there were the proposals that never got off the ground and the deals that fell through. It's worth reiterating that Moscow faced all these setbacks before its military trundled into Ukraine and suffered hardware losses that fatally undermined Putin's carefully cultivated image of a modern and proficient Russian military. I'll cut the card there. Essentially, what you're really flowing through is that there's no Russia fill-in because all their cards are from 2018. Prefer this card specifically because it's modern. It tells you exactly that the Russian military kind of sucks right now. They can't meet anything because their military isn't technologically proficient or modern. Also, all their cards here are just from 2018. None of them are recent. So extend Whitson 21, which specifically states that engagement is the status quo with Saudi Arabia right now, and it's failing. Specifically, the engagement and the arms that we give Saudi Arabia are forcing them to not only double down on the human rights abuses, but double down on the war itself. So they don't care. If you give them arms, they're going to double down. All the support we give them just re-legitimizes the political entity. Also, extend Riedel 21. It wasn't touched. Western democracies solely support Saudi Arabia and Yemen. If we prove that cutting Western democracy specifically isolate Saudi Arabia and they're no longer able to sustain the war, then we win the impact that's excluded or that's talked about in Ben Meyer 18, that the millions die of starvation and genocide. That's practically genocide. I already said that. Moving to contention 2. First, diplomacy fails. Russia has reneged on its promises and increased shelling of areas it said it was withdrawing from. The Russians can't be trusted in peace talks. That's Canada 22. Russian forces bombarding the areas of Kiev after pledging to scale back operations in those zones to promote trust between the two sides. The shelling and intensifies Russian attacks on other parts of the country tempered optimism about any progress in the talks aimed at ending the punishing war. There seemed to be little faith that a resolution would emerge anytime soon. The Russian military reneged on its pledge Tuesday to de-escalate near the capital. The Russian announcement turned out to be a complete lie. At night, they didn't decrease, but vice versa, increase in intensity of military action. Also, you don't buy I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the name, the Saditia card, specifically because it was from, my card is basically 7 days newer. So you're preferring that specifically. Extend Newman 22 here as well. Diplomacy fails with Russia specifically because Russia does not care. Extend to Cohen 22, which wasn't touched. Specifically, they try to turn it with the SOS 15. However, again, you cut off through export controls Russia's military from our support. You cut off them from the genocide in Ukraine. That's what we're solving for. So you extend that analysis. Moving to human rights or aid. First, authoritarianism slows down the government and creates a poorly managed country. That's EU 21. Authoritarian governments, by impeding political institutions, also impede economic ones. The path towards economic progress and continued political control are likely to meet head-on. And aid is not received in poorly managed countries. That's Alberta and $1.98. The allocation of aid dependent on good management. Countries with good management receive 30% more than the typical poor management country. Aid may have accomplished its political goals, but this is key. But aid that went to countries with poor management did little to reduce poverty. And organizations devoted to distributing aid violate human rights. It's Bocart 21. Children in developing countries have been forced to have sex with UN officials to receive food. Children as young as 9. The UN, UNICEF, and the World Food Program have been plagued by allegations of systemic sexual abuse. Over the 24 people at the agency had experienced rape and sexual assault while on the job. We'll cut the card there. Just move down to the second contentions. First, diplomacy fails now. There's no conflict specifically, and there's no conflict or push mechanism. And there's 2 at 20 is power tagged. It's only talking about Great Depression level of activities, which they don't warrant. Open across.
Cool. Ready?
Let me reorganize my flows because, just give me 1 second. Okay, I'm good. Would you like the first question?
Yeah, sure. How many people are in Ukraine?
I don't have the exact count, but we'll reference 100 million.
Okay, cool. You have a question?
Yeah, sure. So let's actually go through. So let's go through your impact scenario on your second contention specifically. If Russia is how can you quantify the repression that happens in Russia? How much does it increase by?
Sorry, you're talking about like the Ingram evidence?
Yeah.
Well, like at one, like I don't think this is like our like main impact magnifier, but like still, I think what the argument is that when it comes to like human rights violations, working with other authoritarian regimes ends up like making it so that any types of actions against them end up not happening because they can get assistance from other regimes. So like maybe sure we don't give you like a specific impact card, but what it ends up doing is it ends up turning all of your argumentation about like where we get tech from, because like our argument is that they just get tech from other authoritarians, and that gets unresponded to.
Can I have a
Can I ask a
follow-up?
question?
Oh yeah, go ahead. You're good.
So, like, I guess what I'm wondering here is like, you keep responding to us like all of your stuff about Saudi is just saying that like Saudi like needs arms. Like you respond by saying like, oh, like Russia has no fill-in, but like
Yeah.
if they have enough arms to continue for several years, like
No, that's
how do
not
you end up
true.
actually solving?
So I mean, how long is several years? Is that
I don't know, 4 or 5. I mean, 13 million people
okay,
like
like
that,
3
like
years, right?
people should be dying,
So
right?
specifically, your card is from 2018, 2019. Our cards specifically warrant that they can't fill in anymore. Like they're newer, right? We're from 2022. It's right now, and also
No,
our
we're
cards
talking about
specifically warrant
fill-in.
the
Like,
situation.
I think there's a distinction between filling in and
Yeah.
already having arms that you can still continue to
No.
use.
Yeah.
That's
So
the difference.
So yeah, you're extending Riedel 21. Saudi Arabia doesn't have those arms anymore. They're literally unable to sustain the war.
Wait, does the
through-
U.S.
Can I
continue?
have the
Is the
next
U.S. selling
question?
arms right now?
Yes. Can I have the
Okay,
next
so then they do have more arms.
What?
Like nothing's changed. Like what has
No.
changed since 2018?
Okay.
Oh, you can
The
have a question if you want.
I'll just make this right. The Riedel 21 specifically says that they can't sustain the war. They don't have enough arms. We might be providing them arms, but they don't have enough to sustain the war. Can I have the next question?
Sure.
Yeah. So like your Ingram 22 card specifically states that sanctions lead to increase in repression. But like what are the numbers on that? And what does repression look like specifically in Russia? Because that's what you read it on.
I mean, it's an empiric, first of all. Like, that's not like our entire, like, it's an area where this happens, but that doesn't constrain all of our impacts to there. But I think repression tends to look like the types of activities that you guys talk about. Things like going into Ukraine, those types of things. So, like, even if you think we don't have an impact, we'll just take yours about Russia. Like,
no, I think you're misunderstanding the question. Your card says that Russia happens, like the repression happens domestically.
6 is over.
What does that repression look like? Because Russia's obviously not genociding their own people. What does the
6
repression?
is over.
They're what?
6 is over.
Sure. Okay. Did you guys need prep?
Take ready prep.
Okay.
seconds. 10 seconds left. Wait, can I have audio?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no speech talk. Order is just going to be like framework, AFNAG. 3 minutes, yeah? Beginning on first word. On the util net benefits debate, what the net benefits misses, the way that they're construing it, is that you can't just like focus on a single scenario and be like, this scenario is the only thing in the debate. No, we have to consider all deaths in this debate. If people die because of our actions, writ large, because we're giving aid, not giving aid, humanitarian, whatever, that matters. You should vote for the debater that best shows you that there's a higher probability of like less bad things happening in their world. That's intuitive. That's well warranted. Okay. Onto their argument about Saudi Arabia. They're just extending through ink here. Even if you let them have their responses, it's not engaging with what's critical. We tell you that right now, Saudi already has enough weapons, no matter what. They're going to continue going out during the war. Also, you don't need high power weapons if you're going to just persecute people. You can go out with clubs. There's no solvency here, given that Saudi regime wants to do this stuff. But even if you don't buy that, we have two responses that flow through this argument for us, even if you buy their responses that they extended through ink. The first one is that we have a turn, Rogan 18, which tells you that pulling support kills any chance of peace. That's a prerequisite to solving the issues there. But then they completely drop the entire Iran DA, which tells you that you need strong ties to Saudi Arabia in order to fight Iran. And arms sales are the crucial thing in that relationship. That's Hansen 18, Knights 18. And then last, if you don't have that, then you cause war. That outweighs everything about Saudi Arabia. It's most likely, it's entirely conceded, 100% strength of link, turns the entire argument. Basically, we are cleanly winning this, even though they've just extended their things through ink. Okay. On the second argument about isolating Russia, okay, a few responses here. First off, it's a war, which means that we can, in theory, still give humanitarian aid here. We can still support Ukraine. But second off, they say that Russian diplomacy fails now. We have cards telling you the opposite things. Like we tell you Russian diplomacy works, they say fail. Okay, let's say you don't want to evaluate it because it's just a strict contradiction. We give you two turns that go unresponded to. First off, we tell you that if you do sanctions, it just makes leaders make resources scarce. And we tell you that what we've seen is Russia's going to become more repressive. That's Engel 13, Durson 09. All right, I'm going to characterize this more for you on our flow. First, addressing the sex abuse NGO thing. First off, we don't have to go through NGOs. They didn't specify why this is unique to our case, why we link in. Second off, this is about food aid. We're not about food aid. We're about democracy aid. Okay, then they tell you that authoritarian makes countries poorly managed, and poorly managed countries don't receive aid. This card is power tag. The first card doesn't actually say that it makes poorly managed. There's a distinction between China being repressive or whatever and actually being poorly managed. There's no link there. But anyway, a few responses. Our evidence is just better. The Matisse evidence is over 6 years, 457 coups. It tells you that when you give aid, you have dependency over those countries are dependent on you. The crucial thing here is that you don't have any leverage when you stop giving aid. A prerequisite to stopping human rights abuses is having leverage in the first place. Otherwise, if you just pull back and just step back from everything, you greenlight the abuse and let it continue. Also, extend our Zaragoza 21 evidence, which tells you that the aid impacts democratization. That's 91 countries, also goes clean and conceded. This is just better evidence. But lastly, even if we fail, we reduce violence to around 11. There's a 4 times less likely chance of war. That outweighs. Then on our second contention, it goes entirely unresponded to. The most important piece here that you need to understand is the double down argument. It tells you that when you impose sanctions, authoritarian regimes get worse because of the internal psychological processes. I want you to apply that to both of their arguments about Saudi Arabia and Russia, which tells you that even if you think they're winning the arguments, some of their arguments, the authoritarian regimes get worse because they're doubling down given the psyche. They're just causing more problems that they're trying to solve.
How long is prep? Is it?
I think it's 3, yeah.
Okay, cool. We're going to take a little bit of prep then.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. All right. Is everyone ready?
242 used.
Yep, 242 used. Okay, so just a quick off the clock roadmap. We're going to go framework, we're going to go AF, and then we're going to go NIG in order. So first on framework, you take net benefits because net benefits shows the best, because net benefits gives specific case evidence. You take the evidence that happens now, especially when talking about volatile situations when things are taking. You talk about you do case specific evidence that's better than aggregation because it gives the best examples and allows us to compare things better than what you would if they were generic. They're trying to do case specific evidence with generic, they're trying to do case specific arguments with generic evidence. So you prefer ours because ours is newer and it also has to do directly with the situations we're talking about. Their evidence is generic. Now you move on to the voters, which is first genocide. You weigh genocide against war, and genocide is worse because genocide is literal ethnic cleansing and is the epitome of racism. Also, genocide kills hundreds of millions of people at times for while war is less than that. So when you see the second voter in today's debate is that they have not answered, the second voter in today's debate is the case turn, because even if aid gets to poorly managed countries, they are literally harming those people that they're giving aid to. They're being sexually abused, and that is a horrendous act against those people. So we can go in and try to be the saviors we want to be, but actually we are harming them even more. Now moving on to the first contention of isolating Saudi Arabia. So first of all, you extend our Item 22 card. We see that Russia cannot fill in. They say that Saudi doesn't have arms, but you prefer our Redel 21 evidence. You flow that through because it is newer. All of their evidence is from 2018. This is a volatile situation. You take the new evidence because it's what's happening in the status quo. And you talk about what is sustainability. We've been talking, and then you move on to their peace talks argument. We've been talking about peace talks for a decade. We've been supplying them arms, and nothing has happened. We see that they do not care. Extend our Witsen 21 card. They will continue this war with whatever. We send our Redel 21 card because it shows that we are funding the genocide happening against the Yemenis, and that's our Ben Mir 18 card. So they say this goes into their NIGHTS card. Extend our Redel 21 card. Wholesale isolation is key. Now moving on to Russia. So first, Russia doesn't. You extend our Karamu 22 card is that diplomacy doesn't work. They say we can still give them humanitarian aid, but aid does not solve. And again, our card is newer. They say diplomacy talks are happening, but ours is literally from after that card that says that Russia pulled out of those same diplomacy talks. And now they finally only answer that with sanctions are bad. But what we see is that genocide is happening now. Our Dickinson 2022 card, the only way to solve this through our Cohen 22 card is export controls. They say that this doubles down on authoritarian regimes, but what actually happens is that with export controls, we cut it off at the source. They do not have the power to exacerbate those human rights abuses because we cut off their military power and their ability to do that. Now, moving on to humanitarian aid, again, they say they power tag, they were power tagging, but they give no warrant. Now, again, even though paid aid is not poorly managed, you still take our card that organizations violate human rights. So this is a case turn. They don't do anything to help with their impacts. Now, moving on to global populism, again, you flow through the fact that IDON 2022 and the diplomacy fails. Even if they do, again, we stop the root cause. So engagement is the only way because we stop them from having the ability to create these harms. They won't be allowed to double down. Are you
Yep.
good?
Yeah, we're ready.
Okay. I'm going to timer set up and then I'll be ready.
Sure.
All right. Whenever you guys are ready, you can go ahead and have the first question.
Okay, how difficult is it to commit human rights abuses?
Not difficult at all to commit human rights abuses.
Wait. So follow up on that. Your whole argument is about how it's like you're taking away the root cause and the capability for them to commit human rights abuses. We're telling you if you do bad stuff, they double down. You just said it's not difficult to commit human rights abuses. This seems to contradict.
Okay, so yeah, so like basically right now they have the ability to commit human rights abuses because they have all of the technology to commit them.
Wait, you just said it's not difficult. You can take a club and go out there and start doing bad stuff. That's what happened. That's what's happening in the Philippines right now.
Okay, so that's a new argument. That's an entire new argument.
No, it's not. No, I made that in my last speech. It was the first thing on the first thing on the Saudi Arabia argument. Even if they don't have enough weapons, they can go out with clubs. Your question.
Okay. Yeah, so that first of all, we stop. Okay, so like first of all, genocide does not happen with clubs. Genocide happens with sophisticated military.
Really? Look at the Rwandan genocide. In the Rwandan genocide, neither of them had high tech. This happens routinely. All it takes is malintent. We're telling you, you increase the malintent. My question.
Okay,
now.
yeah.
My question now. Okay.
That's actually my question. I'm sorry.
No, didn't you ask the question about the Rwandan genocide when there's been? Well,
No,
fine, have the question.
I mean, go ahead. Go have the question. You have the question. Go ahead.
No, it's fine. You.
All right, cool. So whenever you talk about, let's go back to this doubling down.
Sure.
So if they don't have the ability to double down, right?
Wait, but you just said it was super easy to double down.
No, I said okay. So human rights abuses is a very large term, such as the thing that we're talking about, sexual abuse. Someone can go out and sexually.
We're not just talking about sexual abuse. We're talking about like political killings. We're talking about violence. We're talking about a whole host of things. Do not constrain this to sexual abuse.
Okay, first of all, I was not constraining it to sexual abuse. So please don't misconstrue my words and take them out of context. So we were talking about full-scale genocide, but then you wanted to talk about going out with clubs. So if we want to talk about all the things that are happening with human rights abuses, we see that A, we solve specifically for genocide, and B.
How do you solve for genocide?
Okay, let me intervene real quick. And so, like, when we say that human rights abuses are easy to commit, we're saying specifically within the scenarios that we give, they're easy to commit because as Western powers, we fund them. Like,
okay, wait. Can I have a question now? I feel like this has been a lot of you guys. Okay, so in response to why do you think it's not likely for Iran to fill in? I haven't heard much about this. Please engage.
Right. So because Saudi, so again, so what we have extended throughout the entire debate is our Read All 21 card, and is that Saudi Arabia has solely been supported by Western democracies.
Yeah, but that doesn't respond to Iran. Iran's all separate stuff.
And we also took out the link card with the Read All 21 card, is that if Iran will not fall in because and again with our Witten 21 card is that
none of that mentions Iran. None of that mentions Iran.
Yeah, it says they cannot sustain the war without.
No, but it does not mention Iran at all. It's your question.
Okay, so if it's okay if I okay. Give me a second. All right.
All right.
I'll take our last second to prep. Sorry. Okay. No speech shock, of course. It is going to be negaf or afneg. Yeah. Is everybody not ready?
You said afneg.
Yep. All right, cool. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I don't think they really understand like the framework. We're just saying that like it's probably the best to like have the least amount of people die, like genocide or not. Like I think this is probably just good to reduce the amount of lives lost. I don't think they answer this. Not just Saudi, real quick. Rogan 18, which they continue to not respond to, turns the case. We tell you that the only reason that there's going to be any negotiations on this is the only world in which you're actually able to have the United States in the situation. Even if you do believe that they do solve, at best this makes it a wash because it means that both sides can solve. But even still, I think it gives us offense. Second, extend 1918, who tells you that Saudi has enough weapons to continue the war. They continue to try to say that it's fill-in. Our response is not fill-in. It is that they have enough weapons right now to continue. All of that takes out Saudi, but also remember they dropped the Iran DA. This is super important. This is going to outweigh anything they give you. Why? Because this is cold conceded. We tell you on Hanson 18 that the Saudi relationship is needed to counter the U.S. To Iran, but the Wayner 18 tells you that when you don't do that, Iran goes escalatory and starts a war in the Middle East because there's no longer the United States in the region to stop them. This gets cold conceded. Weigh this over anything else over they give you first off a 100% strength of link, and then two, it has hundreds of millions of lives could be lost, way more than that, onto Russia. Now, they continue to tell you what Russia solves. Remember, we try and tell you that even if negotiations haven't solved, in the future they will solve, and we extend all of our evidence to tell you they will, but also force them to give you an impact card about how you actually get, like they say genocide, but maybe 1,000 1,000 lives have been lost. Force them to give an actual impact card onto humanitarian aid. Super important. Actually, on to double down. They conceded in cross-sects of this argument, extend double down, that it's really easy to commit human rights violations. We tell you across the world, which is a larger scope than anything they give you, that when you force populist leaders and you start to aggressively move towards them, they move back, they become more oppressive, they kill more people. This is going to outweigh any of their argumentation, because this is hundreds of millions of people in authoritarian regimes all over the world. This means that you're going to outweigh on scope. This goes cold conceded. Don't let them tell you NGOs aren't the source of our aid. Super proud. Vote NAG.
Okay, just give me 1 second. How much prep do I have? Oh, I have 18 seconds, so I suppose I'll just use it. So, starting now. Okay. Order. Let me just. Yeah. So order. We'll go framework, and I will. I'll address some evidence stuff on the framework as I try to crystallize everything, and then we'll go through the affirmative flow. So we'll start with Saudi Arabia, Russia, and then we'll move into their flow. So. Yeah. Is everybody good? Okay, and then I guess I'm just waiting on a message from Paxton. Okay, yeah, thank you. Okay, let me grab my timer. First voter today is going to be net benefits, because they drop all of our internal links here, specifically extend all of our warrants. Case-specific scenarios are better than their aggregated evidence specifically, and their aggregation specifically, because it tells you like the situations that we're seeing in Russia and Saudi Arabia are extremely volatile and case-specific. You can't just aggregate, like include authoritarian regimes in Egypt to Saudi Arabia. That's what aggregation does. You can't include like the Philippines to Saudi Arabia's scenario. That's why you look specifically at case-specific analysis. Also, if I win a link to genocide, we win the entire debate, specifically because genocide is worse than war. They don't respond to the idea that this is literal ethnic cleansing. Specifically, like this is literally the epitome of racism, as my opponent, or it's not my opponent, but as my partner flowed through, and they don't touch that at all. It means you prioritize genocidal impacts. Moving to the second voter, specifically Saudi Arabia, extend Whitson. It goes uncontested, and it's the only thing that we need to win. Specifically, Biden has been trying to engage for peace like since his presidency. We've been engaging with Saudi Arabia for the past 10 years, and yet it's only forced Saudi Arabia to double down. None of their evidence on Saudi Arabia matters, because it's 4 years ago under Trump, which is 100% different. And second, specifically, like we tell you exactly in Riedel 21, the only way Saudi Arabia is able to sustain the genocide in Yemen is through Western support. You cut that, it's done. Iran doesn't matter. Let's move into Russia diplomacy. The only thing that we have to win here is that diplomacy isn't able to win. Like they don't respond to our Kenneth March 31st card specifically. And you're only looking to this card, not their, I forget what the name is actually, but specifically because Russia has reneged on every single promise since their card. Their card was in March 20th, ours in March 31st. Extend the warrants. Russia has doubled down on like bombing. So that means we immediately, when Cohen 22 goes untouched, like we can stop the Russian military in Ukraine from in the genocide. Also, the very last voter is going to be humanitarian aid, which they don't touch. Humanitarian aid, extend all the cards there. Specifically, all the human rights abuses and sexual assault that we've been seeing with humanitarian aid have gone untouched. And specifically, it turns all their aid analysis. That's why you vote for the affirmative today on genocide.